What if the man who usually calls the shots suddenly got called out? Imagine Donald Trump, the guy who prides himself on dominating every room, every stage, every deal, getting politely but firmly told, "Thanks, but no thanks," by India. And here's the twist. Piers Morgan, never shy with a hot take, just spotlighted India's response, and let's just say, this wasn't your average diplomatic eyebrow raise. No, this was sharp, deliberate, and so well-timed that it left Trump, and honestly, much of America, wondering if they had just underestimated India's playbook. Because this wasn't just about words. This was about posture, about dignity, about a country showing the world, we're not here to be managed, we're here to be respected. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment, "I subscribe," and I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. So, let's rewind a bit. Trump isn't new to big claims. Whether it's bragging about brokering peace, offering to mediate in conflicts, or taking credit for moves that weren't exactly his, he's built a brand around being the deal-maker-in-chief. But here's the problem. When he tried flexing that same muscle with India, things didn't go as planned. Remember the time he casually dropped that Modi supposedly asked him to mediate the Kashmir dispute? Yeah, within hours, India slapped that down harder than a cricket bat on a fastball. Publicly, firmly, and without blinking, they said, "No outside interference. Period." And this isn't random. India's entire foreign policy DNA is built on non-alignment and sovereignty. They don't like third-party babysitters. They don't like outsiders telling them how to handle their neighborhood. From the Cold War to today, India has made it clear. They decide their moves, not Washington, not Beijing, not anyone. So when Trump strutted onto the stage, hinting at brokering peace like it was some reality show finale, India didn't just roll its eyes. It reminded the world of its red lines. Segment number 1. India's response, key elements. Let's break down exactly why this hit so hard. First, the rejection of mediation claims. Trump stood there, chest puffed out, claiming he had been asked to step in between India and Pakistan like some superhero negotiator. But India didn't just correct the record, it obliterated it. Prime Minister Modi and senior Indian officials publicly and repeatedly denied ever asking Trump for mediation. The message was crystal clear. India doesn't outsource its neighborhood politics. This wasn't a small correction. It was a full-on diplomatic sit-down. Second, the emphasis on sovereignty. This is where it gets powerful. For India, sovereignty isn't some buzzword they toss around at press conferences. It's the backbone of their foreign policy. From Nehru's non-alignment strategy to today's multi-alignment approach, India has always drawn the line at foreign babysitters stepping into its affairs. So when Trump tried to spin his deal-maker narrative onto Kashmir, India doubled down. "We don't need a referee. We play our own game." And by saying that, they weren't just talking to Trump, they were talking to the entire world. Third, public diplomacy and global messaging. This wasn't whispered behind closed doors. India made sure its response was loud enough to echo through Washington, London, and beyond. International outlets, from the Times of India to the Daily Beast, picked it up, and voices like Piers Morgan amplified it further. Suddenly, the world wasn't talking about Trump's claim. They were talking about India's clapback. It was a masterclass in narrative control. By owning the story, India made Trump look like he was exaggerating, while India looked cool, collected, and in charge. Fourth, the calm but firm tone. And here's the real killer move. India didn't respond with anger, insults, or theatrics. They didn't stomp their feet or throw tantrums. They calmly, firmly, and almost politely said, "That's not how this works." And that contrast, Trump's loud chest thumping versus India's measured response, made the difference striking. It's like watching someone try to flex in the gym, only for the quiet guy in the corner to casually lift double the weight without breaking a sweat. Who looks stronger? Exactly. Segment number 2. Why this response stings / makes Trump regret. Let's be real. This one hurt. Why? Because it didn't just challenge Trump's words, it challenged his whole brand first. It undermines his claims. Trump thrives on image, being the ultimate dealmaker, the guy who can walk into any room and fix it. So when he publicly bragged about being asked to mediate between India and Pakistan, it was supposed to be another feather in his cap. Except, boom, India says. That never happened. Just like that, the balloon popped. Suddenly, it's not a story about Trump the global negotiator, it's Trump the guy who exaggerated on the world stage. And in politics, perception is everything. Second, it flips the narrative on power. For decades, the US positioned itself as the global referee, the broker, the fixer, the guy at the top of the table. But India's response took that script, shredded it, and handed back a new version. India is not a problem to be solved. India is a player in its own right. This is massive because it means the world has to start adjusting to a new reality. One where America isn't always the director, and India isn't playing supporting actor. Third, it cornered Trump and the US media. When India stood its ground, it didn't just block Trump. It forced American media to wrestle with the fact that their president may have oversold or even fabricated his role. Suddenly, outlets had to cover India's clapback, and that complicated any effort to spin the story. Trump wanted to look like the star of the show, but instead, India hijacked the narrative. That's a PR nightmare. Fourth, it boosted India's global image. And here's the kicker. India came out looking stronger than ever. Calm, sovereign, unshakable. Not reactive, not submissive, just confident. On the world stage, that's priceless. Because while Trump looked like he was chasing headlines, India looked like it was laying down principles. It's the difference between noise and authority. And the global audience noticed. To put it simply, Trump left the exchange with a bruise on his ego. India left with a crown of credibility. That's why this stung, and why he'll think twice before trying to box India into a corner again. Segment number 3. Implications for US-India relations. Here's the first domino. Trust just took a hit. If the US president says one thing and India calls him out, it plants doubt. Negotiating leverage shifts. Washington can't just roll in with swagger and assume Delhi will nod along. From now on, US officials will need to be more precise, more cautious, and, let's be blunt, more honest if they want to keep credibility. India has shown it's willing to fact-check America in real time, and that changes the entire dynamic of future talks. For India's global role, this wasn't just about Trump. It was about India flexing its identity as a heavyweight. Within the global south in BRICS and across developing nations, this sent a crystal-clear message. India will not be pressured into a narrative it doesn't agree with. And the ripple effect. Other nations now see India as a voice of sovereignty and backbone. That elevates Delhi from being a participant to being a leader in the multipolar order. For messaging in diplomacy everywhere. Think about it. Leaders have long gotten away with puffing their chests and making big claims, often unchecked. But India's pushback proved those days are slipping. Words, even from powerful leaders, are now under scrutiny. If you exaggerate or try to overplay your hand, expect someone to call you out, and expect it to go viral. This raises the stakes for global diplomacy. Rhetoric without receipts is a liability. For domestic politics. And let's not miss this. On the home front, India scored a major win. The message landed squarely with Indian citizens. Your government is defending your dignity. No bending, no bowing. That kind of nationalist pride is political gold. It reassures people that their leaders are strong enough to stand tall even against Washington, which has long been seen as the global top dog. For Modi and his team, this was not just diplomacy. It was a masterclass in reinforcing domestic confidence. So the ripples spread wide, from Washington boardrooms to reassess summits to chai shops in Delhi. A single clapback didn't just check Trump. It reshaped the tone of how the world listens to India. Now, before we crown this as a flawless victory, let's zoom in on the fine print. Because in geopolitics, even the strongest clapbacks come with risks. Backlash is always on the table. Sure, India's response drew applause globally, but the US media doesn't exactly like seeing its president contradicted on the world stage. Some outlets spun it as India being too rigid or unwilling to embrace cooperation. And behind the scenes, diplomatic channels might quietly grumble that India's tone, however justified, complicates backroom deals. Not everyone cheers for confrontation, even when it's classy. Could boldness backfire in negotiations? When you plant your flag firmly, you also limit wiggle room. By making it clear there's zero tolerance for outside mediation, India has boxed itself into a harder line. Flexibility is reduced, and in future scenarios, it may be harder to adjust course without appearing inconsistent. It's the classic risk of drawing bright red lines. They look powerful, until they box you in. The balancing act is delicate. India now walks a tightrope. On one side, the pride of standing tall and sovereign. On the other, the reality that international diplomacy often thrives on ambiguity and compromise. Too much steel, and doors could slam shut. Too much softness, and the respect earned could evaporate. The challenge is to defend sovereignty without turning it into stubbornness. Takeaways. So what's the big lesson here? Simple. Assertiveness plus clarity is a game changer. India showed that standing firm doesn't have to mean shouting. It's about precision, consistency, and timing. That mix shifts the power dynamics, making others think twice before trying to frame you in their narrative. Second, sovereignty and truth are becoming the new gold in global politics. You can't control every claim made about you. Leaders will exaggerate, spin, or misrepresent. But you can control how you respond. India proved that a sharp, public rebuttal not only protects dignity, it actively reshapes perception. And finally, let's not underestimate messaging. A few sentences, spoken with clarity, can ripple across alliances, media cycles, and domestic politics. Words aren't just symbolic anymore. They're weapons, shields, and sometimes entire strategies. India used them like a scalpel, precise, cutting, and impossible to ignore. At the end of the day, this wasn't just India rejecting a claim. It was India teaching the world a masterclass in 21st century diplomacy. Don't just play defense. Fit the script, own the narrative, and make even the loudest voices sit up and listen. In the end, what looked like a small diplomatic rebuttal was actually a seismic reminder. India isn't here to play sidekick in someone else's story. It's writing its own script. By calmly rejecting Trump's claims, India didn't just protect its dignity, it redefined the balance of respect in global politics. It showed the world that sovereignty, truth, and clear messaging can carry more weight than bluster or theatrics. And that's the kind of move that makes even the loudest leaders stop, pause, and think twice. With that said, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And until next time.